All right, now our next speaker, I'm sure, probably doesn't need any introduction, but nonetheless deserves the recognition and the accolades that he's been receiving over the past few years, because he, along with a very small handful but a growing number of individuals that were on the other side, have now absolutely discovered a conscience. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm just saying, there's no crime in being ignorant. I mean, everybody is ignorant to a certain point. I mean, we weren't all born with an innate knowledge that the government was here to screw us. Okay? I mean, we all came to this realization at some point in time. We realized that we'd been lied to, and then all of a sudden the bulb goes off over our head and we have enlightenment. But before that, we were all ignorant. Oh, man, you're ignorant. That's not an insult. It's just a statement. It's just a condition. And there is a cure for ignorance. It's called knowledge. Now, stupidity is having the knowledge but ignoring it and not doing anything about it. There are some stupid people, but they're not in this room. Careful, Dan. Point is, though, folks, is that we are or were at one point in time ignorant. And the thing is that once we become knowing, and once we understand that we've been lied to, we've been scammed, we've been bamboozled, we've been raked over the coals, we have a choice. We either continue to do so, or we change our behaviors. We change our schema of the world, our belief system, and the direction of our lives. This is called a growing experience. And this is called maturing. This is called awakening. And this is shall we say, a cure that is spreading across this country, because police officers are finding out the truth, military's finding out the truth, and yes, IRS agents are finding out the truth. And then they have to make a choice. Well, our next speaker is a gentleman that came across this information. Yeah, he thought it was crazy. He thought it was nuts. But then he did a little bit of research and find out that it wasn't nuts. And then he decided to take action. And that's what courage is all about. That's what our founding fathers built this country upon, is courage. And this is something we all need, and this is something that has been demonstrated over and over by our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe, and I think you will also, that this gentleman is one of a growing number of American heroes and patriots that deserve the recognition and have paid the price for it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure and honor to bring to you Mr. Joseph Banister.
How was everybody?
Good.
Just getting my tinfoil hat all ready to go here. All right. Is the cord long enough? I'm a little slow. I used to work for the IRS.
Turned American hero Joe Banister, all right.
Well, buongiorno. That's for my compadre Dan Pill over there. All right. Well, a while back, somebody asked me to give a title for my speech. I never really had one before, so I came up with Favored Fed to Enemy of the State in 2 years flat. And the 2-year period is basically the period that I was investigating the federal income tax. And I was doing this while I was working at the IRS as a special agent in their criminal investigation division. There's some websites that I would recommend you take a look at if you haven't already. And the reason I put these up here is I have limited amount of time, as all the speakers do, and there's plenty of information to share. It's been about 8 years since this mic is really bugging me. Dave, this isn't your mic, is it, that I'm breaking? All right, that helps me a little bit better. All right, so freedomabovefortune.com, Joe Banister, blogspot.com, and 900.net/Banister. I'm going to mention these at the end as well. Well, this little picture was taken back in 1997 when I was just beginning my investigation into the federal income tax. This was kind of the tail end of the 3 or 4 year period when I was really enjoying my job immensely. And I wasn't enjoying it because I enjoyed, turning people upside down and shaking them for their nickels and dimes and dollars and $100 bills or meal receipts for their business lunches. The job that I had actually involved a very high-level investigation of some very nasty people. Those would be tax evaders and money launderers and drug dealers. And so for the first 3 years of my career, I really enjoyed it immensely. I felt like I was using my financial skills to protect the Treasury, to serve my country, and I was quite proud of that. Well, you might wonder, how does somebody like me become a terrorist in this terrorist organization called the IRS? Well, I come from a terrorist family. That would be on your left, far left, is my brother John. He's a sergeant in the California Highway Patrol. And the next is my baby brother Jeff. He's a police officer with the city of San Jose, California. And in the middle is my mother Ann. My father's missing because he passed away in 1993, just shortly before I went into the IRS. And the next is my little big brother, Jim, who outweighs me by about 200 pounds. He's a captain in the Daly City Fire Department, California. And then there's me back when I had my standard Fed issue uniform, the white shirt and tie, Treasury badge, and the Sig Sauer 9mm, just to really make your day. Well, as I said, I worked at the IRS for about 3 years before things started to change for me. I was there a total of 5.5 years. I started in November of 1993, was when I was sworn in. And when I say sworn in, I was sworn as many government employees, or should be all of them, right, and the military people. You take an oath to support and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Even the IRS agents that you encounter, as far as I know, take that oath, and they don't carve out the domestic part. Well, when I took that oath, unusual for IRS agents, usually they'll have a big room, maybe not quite this big, but they'll just have a bunch of people. Okay, raise your right hand. They administer the oath, and that's it. Well, for me, I went up to the 11th floor of the federal building in Oakland, California, and I was with my family, my mother, my wife, my kids, and there was an American flag behind me, and it was really a great ceremony, and it really was poignant for me because I really took that oath very seriously, and I intended the oath to guide me throughout my career there. that was my intention, and I believe I followed through with that. So the first, that was November of 1993. From January of 1994 through June of 1994, I was in training back in Glencoe, Georgia, at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center there. And that center trains just about every agency you can think of, at least outside of the Department of Justice. I believe the FBI and the DEA train in Quantico, Virginia. But Border Patrol, IRS, Secret Service, Customs Service, which now I guess they've all come into ICE. That's the new catch-all government agency. But they all train there in Glencoe, Georgia. So went there for the early part of 1994 and did pretty well. I earned an academic average of 94%, qualified as an expert in firearms use. And I was elected president of both 8-week training classes. And kind of a funny story about how I got elected to be president. There was about 40 students in the class, and we came from all over the country, so we didn't know each other from Adam. But I was sitting up in the front because my name was Banister, and they put the A's in the front, the Z's in the back. And so they asked for somebody to volunteer to collect the picture money for the class. So they asked, and nobody raised their hand. And then you'll get to see how naive I am about things as I go through my speech. And so I look around, I'm right in the center in the bottom of this amphitheater, and I look around and I'm thinking, well, what's the big deal? I mean, collecting picture money isn't that hard. But nobody was raising their hand. And so I thought, well, I'll raise my hand. I can collect picture money. I'm an accountant. So I volunteered. Well, then the next question, or the next order of business was to select a class president. Well, like I say, there were 40 people from all over the country who didn't know each other from Adam. Well, when they had an election to elect a president, who's the only person that they knew to elect? It was Joe, the pitcher guy. So that's an example of my tendency to get into some trouble just from trying to do the right thing. Anyway, the training went very well, and was sent back to the San Francisco office. That's where I first got hired, and then transferred down to the San Jose, California office, which is where I was born and raised. So I thought things were cool and couldn't get any cooler. I was a federal agent working in my hometown, doing surveillances, in my places where I grew up, and knowing the streets very well, and everybody else being lost, and looking to me for guidance. Working on very high-level federal investigations with the FBI, the DEA, state and local agencies. Really, really enjoying my work immensely. And again, feeling a sense of pride that I was, abiding by my oath and serving my country and having some fun while I was at it. Well, what happened was, it was December of 1996, and I had a habit of listening to talk radio. How many people listen to talk radio of some sort? See? It's kind of, it's addicting, isn't it? Yes. Tend to learn things there. Yes. So there was a host of this particular show in the San Francisco Bay Area. His name is Jeff Metcalf, Geoff. JeffMetcalf.com is actually his website. Jeff's having trouble getting on the air nowadays. It's not for lack of talent. I probably could attribute some of what ended up happening in the future as harming Jeff's career. But anyway, Jeff had a lady on his show there that day in December named Devy Kid. Her website's dv.com, devvy.com. And Devy, I'd never heard her name before. I didn't know what she was about. But Jeff, on his show, he was very interested in the Constitution. He was very interested in freedom and abiding by the law. And he wasn't an agenda-driven kind of guy where, the Democrats are always right and the Republicans are always wrong, or vice versa. He was just about the truth. And that was my appraisal of him over the last year or two that I had listened. So wasn't it a shock to me to listen to him bring this woman on the show who started talking about the federal income tax and the Federal Reserve and the 16th Amendment. And the principal thrust of her presentation was that the income tax was a voluntary system, at least largely a voluntary system, that when you actually looked at the statutes and regulations, the laws that our government officials have passed, those laws don't embrace the average American's earnings, the average American's way to make money. The tax laws don't embrace that. So, of course, I thought that was kind of a strange message. When I was listening to that show, I was doing one of my investigations. If anybody that's familiar with the South Bay area, I was driving like northbound on US 101 near East Palo Alto, and I'm listening to, see some people shaking their heads with all the traffic. Listening to this, and I'm thinking, well, lady, this tax ain't voluntary. I got the Sig Sauer here in my left hip, and my bulletproof vest in the trunk, and my shotgun, and I get trained. We go shooting all the time, and this tax ain't voluntary. I can tell you that. But nonetheless, because of Jeff Metcalf's prior ability to show me that he was about the truth, it caused me to kind of short circuit with this mixed message. I had this host who was seen to be very truthful and honest to me, and yet he had this woman saying these wacky things about the income tax. So that caused me to pursue looking into it further, because I thought, okay, either I'm not a very good investigator because this Jeff Metcalf host has fooled me for the last couple of years, or there's something wrong with the income tax and what I'm doing with this job because D.V. Kidd is right. Well, I thought more it was that I didn't read Jeff Metcalf correctly, because I couldn't possibly fathom that the stuff that she was saying about the income tax was actually true. So I set out to disprove her claims. And she gave an address where you could send for a couple booklets, 50 pages a piece. They cost like $1 a piece, so I knew she wasn't making big jing off the booklets. And so when I got the booklets, she was living in Colorado at the time, and I got the booklets and I read them cover to cover. And the thing that I enjoyed about them was that, I was trained as an investigator. So not only would she make a particular point about the Federal Reserve or the income tax, but she would put the name of the person who made the allegation, a website if they had it, and even a telephone number. So, I'm being an investigator and spending a lot more time pulling the trigger on my telephone than my gun. I went ahead and called some of these people once I read these claims that she made. And, I also made just dozens of trips to the law library, just doing everything I could within my own professional personal power to investigate, using all my skills that I had. And so I called people like Bill Conklin. Anybody ever heard of Bill Conklin? Yeah, quite a few. Bill Benson. I'm going to be talking about his fantastic attorney, Jeff Dickstein, and mine. So I would actually call these people, and I was, remember how I talked about being a little naive? Well, I'm not a very good undercover agent either, because when I would call them, I would just say, hi, well, actually, Bill Conklin, I left a message. And I just said, hi, Mr. Conklin, my name is Joe Banister, and I'm an IRS special agent, and I've read the stuff that you claim in D.V. Kidd's booklets, and I'm just trying to find out some more information. I wish you had saved the tape, because then you'd really laugh at me, but that's, that was the truth, and I tended to tell the truth. And so he told me later, years later, like, Joe, that was the most weird message I've ever gotten on my recorder, because usually they'll make some song and dance about, they're Joe Schmo from Kokomo, and they make this big, just some undercover story. And he said, so yours was the strangest undercover story, because you just went out and admitted who you were. You really took me for a spin. So same with Bill Benson. I contacted him. I contacted Paymon with the Freedom Law School. I contacted Steve Hempfling and Sean O'Connor with the Free Enterprise Society. Over a period of 2 years, basically throughout 1997 and 1998, I began to investigate these claims about the income tax. You know, is it true that the laws as written don't reach out and touch the average American? I mean, that was the basic gist of her claims. And I expected that as I foraged down this road to investigate these claims, that within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I would discover that it was all a bunch of bull, right? Because here, I had a degree in accounting from San Jose State University. I'd passed the CPA exam. You know, I had my little CPA license card. Went to 16 weeks of training at the IRS, you know, president of my class, good academic average. And now the government trusted me to carry a gun and a badge around. And this lady's going to be correct that there's a problem with the income tax. I just didn't think it could be possible. But I kept an open mind. So as the weeks turned into months and the months turned into years of investigation, and it took me a fair amount of time because you have to understand, I wife and 2 young boys who are now 19 and 16, but at the time, you know, they were pre-teenagers. Soccer coach. I was working 50 hours a week for the IRS, and you know, had the regular responsibilities that most married men would have. And then in addition to that, I was doing all of this research to try to determine if there was any validity to these claims. So occasionally I would take off a vacation day. You know, you could actually take off vacation hours. I could even just take a longer lunch to go down to the law library near the IRS office and do a little extra research. So I kept plugging away at it, and again, thinking or predicting that I would find the hole in this general argument that we're not all required to pay the tax as the IRS says we are. And in addition to my own research, I was asking for particular documents or evidence from Paymon or Steve Hempfling or Bill Benson, Bill Conklin, a lot of great people who, for some odd reason, trusted me. Because I know I had heard stories about how IRS agents would just absolutely lie through their teeth to get whatever they needed to, you know, get their next promotion or get that person and get the taxpayer in trouble. So amazingly, by the grace of God, people trusted me when I told them that I'm just an IRS agent looking for the truth. An oxymoron, yeah. So anyway, I proceeded, and it took, you know, like I basically got the booklets right at the end, right around Christmas of '96 or January of '97, and spent all of '97 and all of 1998, and then even into 1999 a bit, just doing my best, my professional best to investigate these claims. And of course, being an investigator, you know, when you investigate a crime, you don't just go, well, Mr. Prosecutor, I just know this guy's guilty. You got to prosecute him. It's not like that. You got to gather evidence. You got to go interview witnesses. You got to document to make sure that you got a case that you can present to the prosecutor that he can win. And by the way, there's a little thing called justice. You want to make sure that if you're investigating somebody, you may investigate and find out that they're not guilty, or that they, you know, there was no crime even enough to prosecute. So I believe that I did my homework. Well, my homework culminated in what I ended up calling a report called Investigating the Federal Income Tax, a preliminary report. And you know, I found lots of books on the topic of the income tax, but I didn't find any books on how an IRS special agent comes to these conclusions, and then what do I do about it. So I just tried to rely on the morals that my parents raised me with, the ethics of my profession as a CPA, and also the rule books that govern IRS agent conduct. And based on those guidelines, the bottom line was that I was supposed to voice my concerns to my superiors. And that's exactly what I did. The report that I put together was about 95 pages, and it wasn't everything that I had researched. It was just kind of some of the highlights of it. And I've got some copies at my table you feel free to look at. You can even download a portion of it on the internet. But the bottom line was that I had to present something solid to show my 2 years worth of research and say, look, this is what I've come up with, and I'm really concerned about it. So what I did was I gave a copy to my immediate supervisor, and inside the report, I basically centered on 3 allegations. Due to the constitutional limitations, most Americans are not required to file returns and pay income tax. That was the first allegation or claim. The second one was that the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was never legally ratified. And the third allegation was that the U.S. government finances its operations from the unconstitutional creation of fiat money, not with revenue from income taxes. So how do you think that got accepted by my supervisor? Well, with the report, I sent along a transmittal letter, and the basic message there was, look, I've devoted everything I could to doing a sincere job in investigating these claims. And I ended with, if the IRS declines to conduct its analysis or dismisses the evidence, then I must tender my resignation. My oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States was made to God, and I cannot serve 2 masters. Well, naive little Joe who thinks that maybe all these other agents that took the same oath that I did and are supposed to abide by the same guidelines that I did, they didn't accept my report with open arms or my concerns. And I got a very short memorandum from the chief of our office that said, among other things, the IRS will not be responding to your request for review of my concerns. It will provide you with the necessary paperwork to tend to your resignation. So they sent me home for a week of administrative leave to think about what I was going to do next. They didn't fire me. They just took my gun and said, go home. So when I went home, I had to dodge my wife, who was chasing me around the house with a frying pan. No, I'm just kidding. Because I had put my family through a great deal of stress and sacrifice and true pain. My youngest son was a newborn, or an infant, when I left for training, and my wife went through hell as a single parent while I was in training, and she sacrificed a lot, and so did my children. So to come home and say, honey, I'm on administrative leave, the IRS is looking for me to resign, and the income tax is a fraud. So I say frying pan. She somehow put up with me and let me stay at home that week. So while I was at home, I typed up my resignation letter. And I thought to myself, I may have burned a bridge or two with the IRS, and I really don't think I can go back there. I trusted the people that I worked directly with, but I really was beginning to not trust the agency very much. And I thought that they might just plant something in my desk or destroy what I considered to be a fairly sterling reputation. So I penned or typed my resignation letter to the commissioner of the IRS. And I ended with, based on the obvious futility of continuing to work for an agency that has standards and practices so different from what it professes, and standards and practices so contrary to my own, I'm officially resigning from the position of IRS Special Agent, effective as of the date of this letter. Well, the date of that letter was February 25th, 1999. And that was my 36th birthday, on February 25th. And especially my family, after the fact, was saying, why are you doing this? What's this all about? And I didn't know. I'm trying to find the truth as best I can and live a truthful life. But what was interesting is the date, February 25th, 1913, is the date that the Secretary of State at the time, Philander Knox, proclaimed that the 16th Amendment had been ratified. And then 50 years later, on February 25th, 1963, I was born. And then on February 25th, 1999, I resigned from the IRS. So, I don't know. Seems a little odd to me. Anyway, it's a good excuse for my parents and my relatives. So, bottom line was that the IRS did not like my concerns, and I did resign on February 25th. And I resigned, cold turkey. I mean, I didn't have any job to go to, and yet I had a family to provide for. So that the 1999 was a very tough year. Just quitting a job, cold turkey, and doing a lot of praying that somehow, some way, things would, pick up. I could make a living, and it did work out ultimately fine. Just tried to do a little more praying than worrying. But after I left in February of '99, I learned that it was, I guess, quite unique and rare that somebody in my position would question these things, let alone speak up about it. And so I ended up being invited to speak, much like I'm doing today, and much like I've done over the last 8 years. And I really don't speak that often. I guess there's a few videotapes and photos around, so that's a good thing. Makes it easier for me. I don't need to keep saying the same thing. It can replicate itself. But anyway, I would go out and speak and tended to get people's attention. And it also got the IRS's attention because initially they wanted to just, I guess, pretend that I would just go away and, I don't know, dig graves somewhere, and nothing against grave diggers, but, I would just go away. My questions would stop. Nobody would know I ever worked for the IRS. And things didn't quite turn out that way. There was, thankfully, we have something called the internet, thanks to Al Gore. And there's, and as Ron Paul can testify, and all the people that support Ron Paul, the internet, if there's one thing besides God Almighty that's going to save us, it's going to be the internet. Yes. Anyway, this interest continued to build, and of course, with the help of Freedom Law School, Free Enterprise Society, people giving me an opportunity to speak. And I also had a little website where I made up this feeling outgunned little blurb, and I basically just tried to live my life as best I could and to continue to tell the truth. The activity, the publicity continued to grow, and although I never was interviewed by Peter Jennings or Tom Brokaw or any of those guys, I did appear with many other fine people on C-SPAN, 60 Minutes. Actually, I was in C-SPAN 2 and 60 Minutes 2. Never graduated to the one. New York Times, MSNBC. You might have saw in the clip this morning in Aaron's movie. And I'm just a regular guy. I mean, I'm not quite as nervous as I used to when I speak. But when somebody says, "Oh, would you like to be on Maria Bartiromo's show on MSNBC?" and I'm like, "No." But when you're the only, as far as I know, the only gun-carrying IRS special agent who's acquired these ideas and beliefs, well, I guess I'm kind of the guy. So anyway, but you can probably imagine how the IRS sitting back in their ivory towers would take having somebody like me on TV being interviewed, and they don't like it at all.
Bad guy.
I'm a bad guy. Vagabondo. Anyway, one of the groups that I worked with was the We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education. The chairman of which is Bob Schultz, Robert Schultz. And many of you are probably aware by now there were a series of full-page ads in the USA Today. And once again, since there's not that many former IRS agents who actually are willing to speak up about this, when it came time for an ad, it's like, well, hey, how about, John and Sherry and Joe? Let's see if they'd like to be in a full-page ad in the USA Today. Sure, love to. No, I mean, the poster boy, yeah. So the point of all this is that there was not the kind of media attention that, Howard Dean's Scream might get or something like that. But it was certainly some publicity. And again, the IRS does not like anyone credible. Well, they don't like anybody talking about the income tax, right? If you ever try to ask them a question, you immediately become a tax protester, right? Yes. Well, just think if you actually used to work for the IRS and you say these things. I mean, you are worse than Al Capone as far as they're concerned. Another thing that we did in connection with the We the People Foundation was we had what were called truth and taxation hearings that we tried to schedule. And again, I think you saw that in Aaron's movie, which he did quite well, where we had Congressman Roscoe Bartlett helping us to spearhead an actual hearing that was supposed to occur on Capitol Hill with officials from the Department of Justice and the IRS. And we had written, and I say we, I mean there was a whole bunch of people that worked towards doing this. I mean, one of the ones that sacrificed a great deal was Bob Schultz, because he fasted, he starved himself for 20 days to get to this point. Anyway, the point that he got to, and that we were all very much heavily involved in, was a letter signed by, I don't know if they call him an assistant attorney general or deputy attorney general of the United States, Dan Bryant. And he agreed in writing to supply Department of Justice officials at this hearing. My understanding is that the commissioner of the IRS, who was still Commissioner Rosati at the time, also agreed verbally to have people from the IRS show up at this hearing. Well, notice the date is July 20th of 2001. There's just Roscoe Bartlett's letterhead. That's Dan Bryant's own handwriting, agreeing to supply officials to answer questions about the income tax. And basically there were 500 or so questions that were put together from some of the top minds in the tax movement, the tax honesty movement. And the questions were they were very hard-hitting, very factual. And again, I should point out, I didn't do any independent research that I can lay claim to. I basically investigated and validated what looked to me like the truth. And so there's a lot of great people that you're hearing here speaking this weekend, and others who aren't speaking this weekend, who really deserve accolades. So the bottom line of all of my little speeches and trying to get the word out, or at least I was just responding to invitations for people said, would you like to speak? Would you like to appear here, appear there? And just saying yes, grudging yes. Well, the IRS was keeping an eye on what I was up to. And eventually they decided to file a civil complaint against me. And there's a division within the IRS called, are you ready for this? The Office of Professional Responsibility. And the Office of Professional Responsibility accused me of acting disreputably. They, as I said, part of what I would do after I left the IRS, most of my work had to do with what we call forensic accounting, just basically using the skills that I had acquired up till the point I left the IRS to recreate financial statements and accounting records. And but occasionally people would ask me to come and help them with their IRS matter. So I would actually go into the IRS on behalf of a client and with the client, and we would address whatever claims the IRS was making about taxes that they owed. And I was very professional and polite, but I mean, if I saw what I thought was fraud, I would tell the agent so, and I would show him the proof. Well, you can imagine they didn't like that either. So they accused me in my representation of these clients of disreputable conduct, and they issued a complaint against me, civil complaint. Then shortly after, they amended the complaint. Whatever they had put in the original complaint wasn't good enough. They wanted to bring forward additional allegations. They claimed for the year 1999, I didn't file a federal income tax return, Form 1040. For the year 2000, I failed to do so. For the year 2001, I failed to do so. For the year 2002, I failed to do so. Well, the IRS, they said quite a few times to my attorneys and also to the judge, this judge, his name was Moran, and he was an administrative law judge from the Environmental Protection Agency. That was the person that was to hear my case. And the IRS claimed that it was very important, very imperative that they could protect the public from me. Because I was such a disreputable character, they had to protect the public from me. So in order to protect the public from me, they decided to have my hearing on a military base in San Francisco Bay, on an island in San Francisco Bay that you can only get to by bridge. It's a Coast Guard facility. There's a fence all the way around with armed guards, and you can only get there by a bridge. Now, do you think they really wanted the public to follow what was happening to me while they were protecting the public from me? They did not. They wanted this to be an absolute, I called it, see, Coast Guard Island, the acronym is CGI, so I called it Shanghai on CGI. So I want to ask you, why would the IRS want to keep the public away from a hearing for a person the IRS claims is a danger to the public? And that's a pic. They didn't try to take me to Alcatraz. That's the only picture I could find. They don't have a picture of Coast Guard Island animated. Well, fortunately, one of the fortunate things about my existence post-IRS was that I'm not very computer literate, as you saw when we tried to hook up the computer here. But I tried to acquire an email list of people that might be interested in my exploits. And there are quite a few people around the country who follow what's happening to Joe. You know, what's the latest trouble that Joe's getting into? We got to help this naive little accountant. Anyway, when the word got out that I was going to be shanghaied on CGI, there was just a massive amount of phone calls and faxes to this administrative law judge's chambers, to the IRS. I can't even tell you what kind of volume. I just know it was huge because the IRS was feeling the heat big time, and so was the judge. So they very quickly changed the hearing location from the island in San Francisco Bay to the federal building on Golden Gate in San Francisco. So that was a small little victory for us. It didn't last long, though, because the hearing that I was supposed to get, now, you're all mostly Americans here, right? And you probably think that when you're accused of something, you're supposed to be able to defend yourself? You're supposed to be able to confront your accusers? Well, you might as well, it doesn't happen. Well, it can happen, which I'll talk about later, but it can also not happen. The hearing that was changed to the mainland was then discontinued altogether, and I never got a hearing. And instead, the administrative law judge from the EPA granted the IRS's motion for summary judgment, basically saying that there's no argument here. It's a done deal. There's no need for a hearing. You should just grant our motion to judge against Mr. Banister. And that's exactly what Judge Moran did. He granted their motion and declared that I should be disbarred from practice before the Internal Revenue Service. Well, one little problem is that I never applied to be on any bar before the Internal Revenue Service. But you know, details don't matter to the IRS, so I was disbarred from the non-existent bar. I appealed this disbarment to the next step, which was the Secretary of the Treasury. Seems like a logical step, right? Well, and among the things that I said that I had a little problem with was that they denied me any discovery. They denied me the right to testify on my own behalf. They deny me the right to cross-examine my accusers, deny me the right to a hearing, applied the wrong standard for summary judgment, excluded exculpatory testimony, that's basically testimony that would tend to show my innocence, and they relied on the perjured testimony of an IRS official. Well, when I got the response back to my appeal to the Secretary of the Treasury, it was faxed from the IRS Chief Counsel's office. And the person that rendered the decision in my appeal was David O'Connor, the special counsel to the senior counsel, Office of Chief Counsel, Internal Revenue Service, acting as delegate of the Secretary of the Treasury. Now, a little known fact is you get more pay the more words you have in your title. So this guy's making big bucks. Well, he rendered a decision on my appeal, and what do you think? Do you think he ruled in my favor? No. And I'm hearing that I don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to have to move a little bit quicker here. The IRS is expert at manipulating the news, and they give out this press release claiming that the Treasury Department denied my appeal. Well, I just showed you the documents that show it wasn't the Treasury Department, it was these IRS attorneys inside the IRS. The very people that accused me ruled on my appeal. So, another question for you, how does the IRS spell justice? But the fun and games for 2004 had only just begun. And I'm going to have to move a little quick, and this is why I'm going to ask you to just visit the websites. You think just having a little civil complaint against you for disreputable conduct is bad? Try getting indicted for conspiracy to defraud the United States. That's what occurred in November of 2004. And again, with the master manipulation to publicity, there was all kinds of publicity when I got indicted. And according to my defense attorneys who have been following this kind of stuff for quite a few decades, it was unprecedented to have these officials, the IRS special agent in charge, the commissioner of the IRS, and the U.S. attorney for the Sacramento Eastern District, all making these statements about me. And as you can read there, they said, basically, I'm already guilty. They just said that I've done these things, which was just an absolute outrage. Well, unfortunately for the IRS, they trained me well. And remember when I talked about document? Well, during those 2 years, when I spent a great deal of my time away from my family and trying to figure out the truth about the income tax, I accumulated a few boxes of documents. And when my attorney, Jeffrey Dickstein, who's here and will be speaking, I think, tomorrow, he said, I need to see what you relied upon. So first I bought some stock in FedEx, and then I shipped him my documents. No, I'm just kidding. So you can see Jeff's about 6'6", right, Jeff? And those boxes are taller than him. No, I'm just kidding. Lots of documents. I really did my homework, and as the IRS doesn't seem to want to come around to the fact that I really am sincere and I've tried my best to learn what the truth is, and they're just not cooperating at all. Well, the highlights of my trial was that the prosecutor tried to disqualify one of my defense attorneys just before the trial, Robert Bernhoft. A 28-year veteran of the IRS could not point out anything false in the tax returns that they said I prepared that were false. No government witness could testify that a conspiracy existed. No government evidence even pointed to conspiracy. The case investigator testified that he encountered no evidence that the IRS was impeded, impaired, or obstructed. That's what I was accused of conspiring to do. Impeding, impairing, obstructing the IRS. The special agent who I used to work with got up in the stand and said, no, didn't see any. The defense, us, only called one witness, and that was my former supervisor as my character witness. And we learned from the jury after their verdict that not one juror ever voted for conviction during any of the deliberation proceedings. And one of the two prosecutors didn't even show up for the verdict. I'm not going to have time to talk about this. The Tom D. Leonardo email. If you'd like to come to my table later, be happy to tell you the story. It's pretty good. Take. Okay, well, all right. Basically, the government, as I understand it, when they prosecute you and they have a witness that comes to fore, there's legal case law that says that the government has to provide you with prior written statements that they may have made about you. And so Tom D. Leonardo is a Department of Justice, or was a Department of Justice trial attorney who I used to work with. He was the prosecutor for one of my tax cases. You know, you're an investigator, you investigate a tax case, and eventually it goes, if there's enough evidence there, it goes to prosecution. So you have to work with the prosecutor. Well, he was the prosecutor on one of my cases. And so I had a relationship with him, and he thought of me as a pretty good guy. Well, the government, by prosecution in my case, was so desperate to try to find some nefarious purpose for my investigation and my claims about the income tax that they had Tom testify about what he didn't talk to me about when we were interacting on this tax case. And apparently the point was that if he didn't talk to me about these particular tax issues, then that meant that my sincerity didn't exist in the future. Are you following that? I'm not sure I do, but I'm trying to explain it the best that I can. So anyway, the government, in their desperation to find some witness that could say something bad about me, called Tom up to the stand. And again, because he's testifying, then they have to release these prior statements that he made about me. And one of them was an email that he sent to his boss, whose name is Ronald Cimino. Ronald Cimino is the chief prosecutor, or at least was, the chief prosecutor for the entire western United States for tax prosecutions. Would you say that's pretty high up in the Department of Justice? Yeah. That's who Tom's boss was. So Tom sent Ron Cimino an email telling Ron about how Tom and I had met back in 2000 or 2001, actually it was 2001, saying basically that, you know, even though Joe Banister is king of the tax protesters, I believe that he's a pretty sincere guy. And so as long as you don't let any of his friends come along, those kooky friends, if we meet with him, I believe he'll listen to us. That was the basic gist. And you can see this email on my website, by the way, to see if I'm paraphrasing it correctly. Well, Tom got up on the stand and he testified to these conversations that we never had. That was the whole point of the government's reason to have him. But he also testified that this email he never got a response to. Even though he's telling his boss that, you know, this is an opportunity to have Joe Banister put up or shut up. And he doesn't even get a, no, I don't have time, or that's a stupid idea, or anything. Just no response whatsoever. And you notice that he also CC'd a couple of his colleagues who are also trial attorneys. No response from any of them. So not only did I directly try to get answers with the help of my friends in the tax honesty movement, but indirectly through Tom D. Leonardo, and I didn't learn this till I'm in my trial, and the government, you know, hands me this little folder, and my attorneys, this little folder with this email. And so we're feverishly trying to read it to see what it is. They were trying to just sandbag us and giving it to us at the last minute. So when I read it, you know, I just about fell off my chair, and I whispered to Jeff Dickstein about, you know, what this is about. And Jeff, in typical fashion, is like lightning fast in, you know, developing a strategy based on information that he just received. He's incredible. So anyway, I would invite you to check out that email on my website. You'll get a kick out of it. Bottom line is that the jury determined that there wasn't any evidence of any conspiracy and that I had not prepared any false tax returns. At least there was no evidence that anything was false about them. and the jury acquitted me on all the charges. No surprise to me. I wouldn't wish that kind of experience on my worst enemy, I'll tell you that. So for the future, some of this stuff is kind of in the past, which you'll see in a second. The future is the past, back to the future. Verify this kind of information for yourself. Don't take anything that I say as necessarily truthful. Evaluate it for yourself. Think about it. Take your time. Educate your friends and neighbors. You're going to have to put up with them looking at you like you have two heads, but you'll get used to it. And the biggest thing that I think part of my mission is to help you infect the jury pool with the truth. Again, here's some websites, some of which I gave you before. So in closing, and I hope I'm pretty close to the deadline here, we'd be happy if you come back to my table at the back during the break, and I can fill you in on any details or questions you might have. Got some free literature, got the report that I issued to the IRS. You're welcome to take a look at it. But lastly, I wanted to put in a few words about my friend Jeffrey Dickstein. How many people have heard of Jeffrey Dickstein? Okay, not too many. Jeffrey Dickstein is an attorney, and he's been an attorney for how long, Jeff? 31 years. And Jeff, thankfully for me, was available and willing to take on my case. And nothing to detract from Robert Bernhoft, my other counsel, or all of the other people that joined in this effort. But the person that drove this trial to success, that communicated to the jury that I was an innocent man, was Jeffrey Dickstein. Jeff he's devoted his entire professional life to defending people, principled people, for 30 plus years. He's disrupted his personal life a great deal over those 30 years. He's disrupted his economic life. And right now, or for the last year or two, Jeff has been helping Bill Benson. How many people have heard of Bill Benson? Okay. Jeff is basically sacrificing everything. He's having financial difficulties. He's been representing Bill Benson for no charge, or whatever money might come in now and then, for a long, long time. Bill Benson's case, which Jeff is going to talk more about, is absolutely historic, and you need to learn more about it. But Jeff Dickstein is putting everything he has into defending Bill Benson in this case. And he's really not defending just Bill Benson. He's defending all of us. Yes. He absolutely is. So I hope that you will, well, Jeff, will you please stand up? So in closing, if you have a little bit of extra economic good that's come your way, and you might share a little bit of it with Jeff, he really has devoted 30 plus years of his life to bring us to where we are today. And I hope that you'll give him certainly shake his hand, but find out from him, how are things going? What can I do for you? How can I help you? Jeff, do you have a website? JeffDickstein.com. It's JeffDickstein.com. And Jeff is I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Jeff Dickstein being able to communicate to that jury that I was an innocent man who was trying to blow the whistle on the IRS, and that the government was conning them. And Jeff put together the most awesome presentation to convey the truth I've ever seen in my life. So I thank you very much for your time. No acquittal on the front page.